Welcome to another edition of the NCBI Podcast. I'm June Tinsley, Head of Communications and Advocacy with NCBI. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Eleanor Burke. Thank you very much, Eleanor, for taking the time out to have a chat with us.
Thank you, June, for inviting me.
Great. I look forward to our chat. And I suppose as an opening question that I ask all my guests, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm the youngest of 6, born a long time ago. I've just had my 70th birthday recently.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I come from the west of Ireland, Carrick-on-Shannon. I was born with sporadic Aniridia, and this means that no one else in the family has it, and that there's no actual known reason why myself, as the youngest, got the Aniridia.
There's no genetic or hereditary factor there.
Well, no. I'll talk about that a little more in the moment, but
Great.
There's no genetic within my own family.
Okay.
So, born in 1952, I was diagnosed immediately at birth. My mother asked the doctor immediately, "Why is my baby not opening her eyes?" And she was not prepared for the information to be parted onto her. They said at that time, "Well, your baby's stone blind and will never be able to see." Thankfully, I do have some vision, and I had more vision when I was younger. So, going back to a little more about myself, I went to the local primary school in Carrick-on-Shannon until the age of 10, but it was quite obvious that really I wasn't coping. So interestingly, it was through my mother being a member of the ICA, the good old Irish Countrywomen's Association, that she made the contact. A speaker from NCBI was invited, and through that they got to hear of St. Mary's for the Blind school. Back in those days, horrifically, it was referred to as St. Mary's Asylum for the Blind. So in 1962, it was arranged for myself and my parents to come and have a look around St. Mary's. And what I saw was very positive for me. One thing which struck me immediately, even at the age of 10, was to meet children who also were visually impaired like myself, and then, astonishingly, to see how these children could read using their fingers, which of course was through the medium of Braille. And yes. I'd been struggling at home, couldn't read print books, couldn't do handwriting, and immediately I felt I needed to come to St. Mary's for my education. I think that was very forward-looking for me as a 10-year-old.
Yeah, and obviously the move from the west of Ireland up to St. Mary's, which is now Child Vision, is a absolute seismic move to make.
Seismic. I mean, a 10-year-old didn't realize leaving home, leaving one's family, one's friend, but then building new relationships, new friendships, becoming educated was also important. So then fast forward some 6 years or so, 1967, and a few of us were selected at St. Mary's to become the first children from the School for the Blind to go ahead and do intermediate certificate. I think it's called junior certificate these days.
Yes.
And following on from that, we did leaving certificate. There were just 2 of us, actually. And then it was decided that we would go ahead and go on to 3rd level education. And so we applied to do physiotherapy in London. At that time, it was just myself who was accepted onto the course that year, my friend coming the following year. but that left me in the history books being the first to leave St. Mary's and go on to a third level education.
A significant achievement, definitely.
Indeed, indeed. I mean, now what really interests me is looking at and hearing and reading about all the achievements of young visually impaired people through the NCBI website, and even hearing about academic grants been given to people, helping them in their studies. So it's all very changed days, very positive, and I'm very pleased at all I'm reading about it
Which is
and
great.
hearing.
And as you say, things have moved on. And as we spoke to Roisin in an earlier podcast, who also has Aniridia, she was received her education in mainstream school, which is now obviously much more the most common approach to take when you have a vision impairment.
Absolutely. I was simply browsing my Facebook page one night when I came across Roisin's interview. And of course, it immediately took my interest because people with aniridia, we are very few in number in Ireland because it is very rare.
Yes.
Um, and of course, I started up a group in Ireland myself in 2017. And again, this was in part related to Aniridia Day, which also started off for the first time in 2017. But one of the major hurdles I've had then and continue to have is obviously due to data protection. It's very difficult to get hold of those people who do have aniridia. And it's only really through, making it known about myself having aniridia publicly, because I can approach NCBI and I can ask, how many numbers do you have? Or I can approach any of the ophthalmic clinics, but I cannot be given the contact details of
Yes.
anybody.
Yes.
And that is frustrating, but that's the case in anything. So I think, therefore, it is very important to get the message out there about aniridia and for others to know that there are groups, self-help groups out there who can help and support, particularly parents of young children, like when I go back and think about myself
Yes.
and my mother and the shock she got. Now, more recently, I've taken up swimming with Vision Sports Ireland. And when I started my swimming, again, just before my session, there's a younger youth session, and talking to a parent, we were just exchanging what visual problems I had and what her daughter had. And it turned out her daughter had aniridia as well. So I've come across a few again in more recent years. So anybody listening who does have aniridia, I'd be very happy for people to contact me to join the aniridia group community in Ireland.
Great, thank you. And we'll put a shout out again at the end of our chat. And I suppose, Eleanor, for individuals who are unfamiliar with aniridia, what are the main issues that you do have with your vision?
As Roisin said in her interview, aniridia means a lack of iris in the eye. The iris is the colour part of the eye. And because there is no iris, somebody with aniridia is photophobic and very, very sensitive to light and brightness. So hence, on a beautiful, glorious summer day, it's not ideal sight conditions for myself. So the sun is in your eyes,
Yes.
and whatever vision one has, it's just so difficult to see. So you'll often find that people with aniridia wear tinted glasses
Yes.
just to get some protection. Um, Now, there is lack of iris in the eye, but often people born with aniridia may also have congenital cataracts. And I certainly have congenital cataract. And as it was 70 years ago, of course, um, it was very difficult then for it to be removed surgically. But I have come across a lot of people with aniridia today who do have successful cataract operations. And
Yes.
then lumbered upon that, of course, aniridia can be, if people are lucky, just a condition on its own. But another eye problem, which I then have, is secondary glaucoma. And of course, it's glaucoma, and as glaucoma increases, that it causes a greater deterioration in vision. So really, over the years, people with glaucoma and aniridia will often reduce their vision quite considerably. And unfortunately, this has happened for myself as well.
And I suppose the reality is, as you said, it depends on the individual whether they have other eye complications or not. But
It depends on the individual. Some do, some don't. Some manage for many years without any great limitation on their vision. Others even can be very severely visually impaired. But just to pick up on two things that you've mentioned already. First of all, as we said, Aniridia Day is international, and that is on the 21st of June. That's Midsummer Day. It's the longest day of the year. So we picked that date because it's the date when there is most brightness, most sunlight, and
yes,
that is what we are very sensitive to. The other thing is, I was saying that I had sporadic aniridia, and you were asking about genetic or familial aniridia. So the sporadic is even more rare than the aniridia itself. In terms of genetic, yes, there is within families genetic aniridia, and it will be handed down from one parent to another. So you will find families where granny has it and the parent has it, then the children have it and the grandchildren.
yes.
So with aniridia, it's a PAX6 gene deficiency. And well, with all the research that's going on today, they're certainly looking at ways of treating the aniridia genetically, but I really think that is still a little while off yet in the future.
Yes, probably. And I
Some
suppose
people have various surgeries. I had various surgeries myself, which didn't really help me. Some people have had artificial iris implants, and that seems to have helped them. I notice a lot of these are really people in the United States rather than in the UK or Ireland.
right,
So,
right.
although I know one lady, I think, in Ireland who has had one, but the other problem with aniridia is the cornea gets very cloudy, and that also restricts the vision.
And can I ask, in terms of what we know, admittedly, it's the census 2016 figures that there's about 55,000 people in Ireland who are blind or vision impaired. Would you have any idea of the numbers who are
Well,
living with
just
anorexia?
handful, really. There
Uh-huh.
wouldn't be more than possibly 10 per
Okay.
year who are diagnosed with aniridia in Ireland.
Yeah, so as I said,
So,
it is very
my first, I think, age 64 before I ever met another person with aniridia. And I'm a patient at Moorfields Eye Hospital in London, and I always have been since I went to London at the age of 19. And I think the consultant was really wondering how could she help me next. We were running towards exhausting all various types of treatments, etc. And she had mentioned to me about the Aniridia network in the UK. So I joined the Aniridia network in the UK, and it was really very heartening and reassuring to meet others with aniridia. And I subsequently became a trustee on the Aniridia network in the UK for 3 years. So it was very interesting meeting all those people and
Sharing experience,
helping
I
them
presume.
really and sharing experiences. Yes.
And would you say there was one common um, challenge that you guys experienced more
Well,
than any other?
absolutely everybody. It's the photophobia. I think it's the fact that you can be indoors and you see a certain amount with your vision, and that's fine. And you go out on a beautiful bright day like this morning, and you're just thrown by the sun into total blindness for a while. And obviously your vision, like it does adapt, like as anyone moving from maybe a mid light position into a brighter or into a darker. Everyone's eyes have to adjust, but somebody with aniridia, it takes a longer time to adjust. And likewise, then when you're coming in from very bright into a room, initially you're just thrown again and you can't see a thing again until your eyes adapt, and then you can,
And can I ask you
readjust yourself.
in
Mm?
terms of can I ask you in terms of um, online activities? Do you favor kind of websites that have clear color contrasts and things that you can adjust um, the features on those kind of websites? And have you found that they have increased in volume in the recent past?
Well, definitely websites with contrast are very good and very important. I would certainly go for ones with contrast because you can even then navigate the site by looking. It might be that something's got a particular color background, like yellow, and you can immediately move to what section you want once you know the highlighted colors. If I'm reading, say, if I was using a closed circuit television screen magnifier to read, now there are various options with color combinations with these, but for myself, and I think most people with aniridia, we find that black background with white text is preferable. It's really quite difficult if you have the reverse, which is positive, the white background with the black text, because again, you're getting glare from the white background. Now,
And
I also have to admit that while I have vision, I also depend on speech technology as well. So I back up the speech with what I'm looking at visually. I also use a lot of products, the Apple products, and with them, again, they are designed that they give you color contrast, which is very good. So I always favor having the white text on the dark background.
and it's great that many Apple products and Android as well have kind of now built in those features within mainstream technology because it
Well,
means then
absolutely. I think maybe Apple was to the forefront with this technology, but as you say, Android came along, and there are a certain amount of users who would actually say that Android accessibility was more advanced, or that you could do more with it than Apple. But I think we all tend to plug whichever
yeah,
device we use, But the thing is to realize, I just pick up my iPhone, and it's such a small device. It's so much communication at my fingertips, literally. Only in the last 15 years, have we had so much access to, well, just like all information on the web, just equally with those who don't have a visual problem, really.
true, true.
It's fantastic.
And it certainly has, as we keep saying, been a total enabler for people who are
Well,
blind. Visually impaired.
absolutely, I can recall back, well, maybe it's not, maybe it's even less than 15 years ago. talking about this device which you could read character by character, word by word. You could surf the net. You could do your emails on a purely smooth surface, and just wondered how on earth could you do that? When I'm so dependent on touch for things and doing things in a tactile way. And really, you know, we're really indebted to these people who've invented all this wonderful technology.
Yeah, it's true. It certainly has revolutionized things on so many levels. Um,
Yes.
but that still doesn't detract from the need from things like Braille. And would you still be a regular Braille user?
Oh, I would be. I would be. I mean, even down to if I'm taking something like medication or eye drops, it's excellent the fact that even these have Braille on them, and it's usually the grade 1 Braille, which grade 1 means it's at a basic level, that it doesn't have abbreviations, which makes it again accessible to people who are just familiar with the Braille alphabet itself. But so important. um, Going in a lift, if I want to go to a certain floor and there isn't anybody else in the lift with me, it's really great to find tactile markings on the lift.
Yes.
And then, even just using around the home tactile markings, it may not be Braille, but these markings can be put on washing machines, cookers, tumble dryers. And again, of course, saying that, I also have to realize that we're even moving technologically to these smart devices in the home now, where I think people are now suddenly using their mobile phones
To
and
turn on washing
even
machines.
visually impaired to turn on their cookers and
Yeah,
their
exactly.
dryers and their washing machines. But I mean, all fantastic. I mean, I've only recently myself um, introduced myself to the smart plug. I mean, how lazy are we getting? So it's great technology. But and as for the use of Alexa, to think I can sit in my armchair and not move and have the radio turned on or have the television turned on.
Yeah, it's
You
all
know,
voice commanded. Yeah, no,
yeah, absolutely. Making us all very sedentary. But there again, we have to get out and do activities, and for that reason, I'm very pleased with having joined Vision Sports Ireland, as I said. And for myself, I've been doing the swimming, but we had a great weekend just this
with
past
Mayfest
weekend.
on. Yeah,
Yes, the
yeah.
Mayfest. Yes, yes.
And are you still involved with the Dunleary bike scheme that was
Yes,
launched last
yes.
year?
Well, yes. And when I was in London, though, recently, I had an opportunity to ride on a tricycle, a double tricycle. So I just sent them on a photograph of myself on the double tricycle. I'm not a great person in terms of using a tandem, but I really enjoyed my tricycle ride with a friend in London there in Regent's Park. Just
Great.
loved it.
And I
Yes.
hope that the bike scheme in Dunleary is being well used and taken up, because it certainly was quite innovative when it was launched last year.
Very innovative.
Great.
Very impressed with that. And it got great publicity, which was great to see. And um, even RTE picked it up and publicized it, which was excellent. And these people are volunteers and giving of their own time, and not only in the bike hub, but in all different activities. Um, and I think it's so important that we recognize the work of volunteers right across the board, in certainly for myself in terms of visual impairment. I have a volunteer who'll come out with me with my guide dog so that I can free run my guide dog. There are the volunteers at swimming, there are the volunteers in the tandem group. And as I say, I don't want to start listing because I leave somebody out, but just a big plug of thank you to all our volunteers that are around.
And I'd echo that, obviously, for some of the volunteers that are involved in our delivery of some of our services, and also in our shops, because we certainly wouldn't be able to run our 130 chain of charity shops without our much needed volunteers. So
Indeed, amazing. And I have to smile every time I look at information through the NCBI website and I see about charity shop in Carrick-on-Shannon. And I think, gosh, did I ever think I'd ever see the day an NCBI charity shop in Carrick-on-Shannon? Because as a child, my mother was an honorary secretary for the NCBI branch in County Leitrim all those years ago. So
Right.
I was really quite young when I first heard about NCBI, I have to say.
Well, it's that the organisation's 91 years old, so it's been around for a long time.
Yes.
And I suppose, Eleanor, just to conclude there, the question that I ask everybody at the end is, what one piece of advice would you give to a parent whose baby has been born with aniridia?
Well, the one piece of advice is just enjoy having your new baby. Don't let the fact of a diagnosis and a label come in any way between you and the abilities of your child, because we are all individual people. We all have challenges in life. The person with aniridia has a visual challenge, somebody else will have something different. I think learn together, but most importantly, be aware that there is support out there and self-help groups. And don't be afraid to ask for the help. There's nothing wrong with asking, and it can only all be positive.
Very wise words, Eleanor. Definitely, definitely. And I suppose if there are any listeners who are interested in participating or learning more about the Aniridia Day on June 21st, or getting in touch with yourself, you mentioned earlier you're happy enough for me to share your contact details with those individuals. That's the case.
Absolutely, yes,
Great.
absolutely.
So I suppose if anybody is interested in contacting Eleanor, you can do that through me. So the best thing is probably just to call 1800 911 250, or jump onto the website ncbi.ie, or my email address is june.tinsley@ncbi.ie. But for now, Eleanor, I'd just like to say a big thank you. And I look forward to celebrating National Aniridia Day with you on June 21st. And best of luck with the whole thing.
Thank you.